Hi, I'm Tom Gerard. I'm a volunteer with the Biddeford Cultural and Heritage Center. I'm here today at the City Theater with Nicole, Laura, and Scribner. Today is June 1st, 2023. And with us today from City Theater are...
Hi, my name is Renee O'Neill. I worked as a former business manager at City Theater, and my experiences with City Theater began in 1976.
Hi, I'm Mark Nahorny. I've been a board member at City Theater since 2005 and past president serving from 2016 to 2022.
And my name is Alyssa Rojecki-Forcier. I've been volunteering with City Theater since 2011 and now the theater manager since 2022.
Hi, my name's Renee O'Neill, and I'd like to take you through a tour of City Theater. Today we'll be talking a little bit about the building. There was an original building here that was built in the 1860s, and then take you up through City Theater in its current time. So starting with the original building, what you see here is the footprint of the building that originally was here in 1860. City Theater was also here, but the configuration was a little bit different, and here's why. The original building had originally no clock tower, and one was added later. Then most of the construction up above was not brick and mortar, it was wood. And in about the turn of the century of 1894, people smelt smoke in the building, and a fire was had started, and no one could really figure out where it was coming from. Like the building today, there are merchants that have spaces down here, and merchants did not want their items to get wet, so they actually told the fire brigade to please do not use too much water because it's going to ruin our stuff. Well, things got ruined. It was pretty much a catastrophe, and back then they had horse-drawn wagons with a water tub in the back, so they really did not have the capacity to put the fire out when it really started going. It actually took several hours before people realized how badly the fire had established itself. The theater at the time, right now, if you are standing on stage, you're facing Main Street. The theater actually was sideways at that time and actually had capacity for even more people than we have today. And similarly, it was used for pageants, it was used for community-based performances, as well as traveling troops. The Barrymores, Edwin Booth, they were all part of a circuit that would come through and bring traveling entertainment, as well as locals. So what happened, going back to the fire, was basically the whole building had collapsed into itself. And I have a newspaper article that was written, and this is again cut and pasted from microfiche, but this is the size, and you can see that they had illustrations depicting the fire. And we also have to remember this happened at the end of December, so when the water was placed on the fire in the building, it froze. So it looked, in some pictures, it looks like an ice castle. And you can see here, again, they're saying fighting against the flames in the freezing cold, and 5 hours after the alarm before the fire was under control. But other pieces that I've read show that the fire had started much earlier than that. And this was in December 31st of 1894. So, not unusual to City Hall of today, the city fathers of the day were arguing about whether or not to rebuild a theater, and arguing whether or not to maybe sell the property, maybe have City Hall placed in another area and forego a theater. This went on for weeks, and finally a decision was made to rebuild the theater, as the community felt it was a way for the community to have entertainment, arts and culture. Again, this was at the turn of the century before the Depression, so things were looking great. And they hired John Kelvin Stevens as the architect. So John Kelvin Stevens is a noted architect in the state of Maine. He was most known for his shingled houses that pretty much are in many different places in the beach areas throughout the state. Also, I believe the Blaine House may have been one of his works as well. Thanks to his design, which was a bit different for its time. So can you imagine at the end of the 1800s into the early 1900s, Victorian style was still all the rage. It was very ornate and intricate. Fortunately for all of us today, John Kelvin Stevens did not do a lot of fancy pants, trims, and molding, and instead kept cleaner lines, more of a Rococo or I would say colonial feel, and you'll see that when we go inside. That helped us keep the cost down tremendously in terms of the restoration. And today that's really what we've been trying to do over the years, is attempt when we could to go back to what John Kelvin Stevens' vision was. So let's start with the marquee. This is obviously not the original marquee. We have had several marquees in the past. And this one was actually part of a donation from a trust fund from the Hearst family. The original marquee really wasn't a marquee. It was a carved sign, which we'll show you in just a moment, that I actually located in a closet in City Hall. And it just said City Hall. And how they used to advertise were with sandwich boards. Again, lots of foot traffic, people moved a lot slower, people were walking the sidewalks. It was a great way to show what was coming, and it was ever changing. So sometimes I had multiple shows in one day. Subsequently, when the theater became a movie theater, another marquee was placed, and it was a modern marquee that just said City on it. And it was a marquee that could be changed to let you know what movies were coming. And that was taken down at the end of the era of when it was a movie theater. It became an albatross because it was heavy, dangerous, and no one wanted to touch it, and it was expensive, and there was great rejoicing when it went on a flatbed and left. Then there was another marquee right before this one in the probably the 80s. These awnings became very popular, and that also had the ability to change the lettering. But the challenge with that was on a windy day, we'd be chasing letters down the street, and someone had to get up on a ladder and change the marquee. That also became very worn and torn, and fortunately, the Hearst family approached me and said, we have some money that it's in a trust that we would like to liquidate. What do you have for projects? And I had a binder full of information ready to go, saying, we need a new marquee. And with that funding, we utilized the design. We wanted it to have the feel as though it came from yesteryear, but had some contemporary features for today. And that's what we have, and it's held up pretty well. It has one giant light bulb in it, so the other ones had multiple light bulbs. It's not ideal necessarily for the changing shows that we do, but we also had to get the permission of the people who are providing the funding and also code to be able to put what we have here today. Before we step inside the theater, I just wanted to point out these doors. These are not the original doors, but they were put in as part of the renovation and restoration project, and those were also part of the donation that we received from the Hearst Foundation. And what's really interesting is the doors that were there before looked more like a theater set of doors. They were glass, and they had the crash bars with all the brass on them, but they were tiny and they did not fit code. So we had to have those removed. There's also a mosaic that's here that it's questionable that it's actually original, but someone had done quite a bit of repair on it back in the, I think it was probably the early 70s before the theater had reopened. And as a result, Opera House is really how we we like to refer to the theater is because that's really what it was originally, was an opera house. So now we're in the front entrance of the theater, and you can see this isn't particularly very grand. It was actually a bit functional at the time. There was, when it was a movie theater, there was a place where someone collected tickets out here. And also, I'm gonna have Tom talk a little bit about what was actually in this little tiny space right in this area.
Well, at one time, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, Bert Gagne, who was a local barber for years and years, I don't know if Bert is still alive, but he cut hair for a long time in his barber shops on Main Street and his home on Elm Street. But for a few years, he was right in this little corner, a little barber shop right here. And I can remember coming down on my lunch hour at St. Mary's School and that's when I'd get my hair cut. You know, every 4 to 6 weeks, I'd run down here on my lunch hour and Bert would cut it. And my memory was it was 60 cents back then for a haircut.
And what we did to honor this space, it actually ended right about here. There was a little door, and we used to keep the letters for the marquee back in this little tiny room. And when it came time, we had the sprinkler system where they basically have to, I don't know if you can come this way, but this is where our sprinkler system was, and we can't move it. So we said, well, we'll honor the barbershop by kind of keeping what was there as much as possible. And I think that it gives you that feeling that something was here before. So the other feature that we were able to uncover that was a beautiful surprise was this terrazzo floor and the beautiful border. Unfortunately, what happened was, I think there was a water main issue where they actually had to chisel their way through this part, because if I took this rug out, there's a different type of tile under here. It's just like a marble tile. So how did we get creative and say, wow, we have a couple of spots where we actually have the original, and let's make it look original. So we got creative with putting the carpet in to make it look like a natural transition. The other thing was these stair treads were all covered with linoleum before we did the renovation and restoration work. So we pulled the linoleum off and went back to the wood, which likely, it's hard to know what color it was originally, but we went with a lighter color mostly for safety reasons. But it's something that, again, you can see if you were walking up the stairs that it's definitely worn out from the years of people walking up and down. So as you come up the stairs, one of the things that used to be here when it was a movie theater were mahogany panels and showcases that you would see movie posters and coming attractions. And that pretty much had been in place. My guess is they did a movie theater renovation probably in the 50s. And the attractions were really pretty positive in the community because everyone wanted to see movies, and we had multiple movie theaters in this community. What we found when we pulled the masonite away was, and we kept this absolutely original, so I'm just going to take this down for a moment. We went through layers and layers of paint. So we're on the first landing as you enter City Theater, and what you see before you is a really interesting sign. This was actually on the front of the building and the entrance of City Theater. And how I know this is that I found a photograph of that section of the theater that had this carved sign. And that had been, believe it or not, stored upstairs in one of the big rooms that it's used as a storage closet. And one day I was just kind of looking around there and I could see a corner of it and just said to myself, oh my goodness, I think this is the original sign that was on the building. And lo and behold, it was. So we've placed it here. We can't put it back up above because things are a little bit different with the marquee up there, but this is the sign from, as far as we know, from 1896. So the restoration work that has occurred in this stairwell, as well as the marquee, would not have been possible without a very significant donation from Irving Hurst, and we all affectionately knew him in the Orchard Beach community as Bud. So Bud's son, Dr. Hurst, the dentist, had contacted me and asked if we were interested in putting together a proposal for any work at the theater, as he had money that needed to be liquidated from Irving's trust. And I had a bunch of different projects, but I figured that this one would be one that there would be no other way to get the money. And as a result, we were selected as the recipients, and it started with the marquee and continued through this whole stairwell into the lobby. And Bud was somebody who was very well known. He was very generous to also Sweetser and some other causes in the community. For the movies,
Yeah.
what might you think would be the reason for putting these pointy little metal pieces on the stairrail?
We always assumed they didn't want us sliding down the banister. That didn't stop some kids, so I can tell you that.
That's exactly the
It's
reason
one of the first things I noticed when we came up today.
Yeah. And these were also, believe it or not, all these spindles were covered with paneling as well. So all of that was removed. I think I actually removed probably this much paint, varnish, and whatnot on the stairrail. And then we had carpenters, it was Mike Labby did a ton of work in this area. So Mike, you know Mike from the community. Yeah. And so Mike was our carpenter, he was our fix-it guy, our MacGyver guy, because there aren't any really straight corners when you do renovations and restorations. Things shift and they move, but Mike did a great job. And all the beautiful stenciling, once we go into the theater, it continues. Tony Castro, so Tony Castro and company, I believe he had his 2 daughters, probably 2 or 3 other young folks at the time, join him, and he was responsible for discovering the original paint colors, digging through the layers of paint, finding the stenciling in the original places, and either replicating or restoring and repairing. I call him the patron saint of paint and plaster. If we had not had him, this restoration would have not have occurred. He was very generous in holding a bid that I had him do for like 5 years, and when we finally had the money, he came in and did the work in stages, and they were a delight to work with. And Mike Labby was my right-hand person. He was wonderful. So we also worked with local contractors whenever possible. So that part was, I think, a real community feel and pride went into all of this work. So behind the paneling, one little treasure that we knew we had were these stained glass windows. So there was paneling, 2 showcases, and how we knew there were stained glass windows is from the outside we could see them. The challenge was we didn't know if they were low or higher. It was really hard to tell the positioning. So when we finally had the ability to unveil them, we were in for a treat because they were actually in pretty good shape. The paneling had preserved them. All we ended up doing was cleaning them and replicating the molding. And they are quite beautiful. And the other thing they did was help to substantiate the paint colors, because you can see the paint colors were tied directly in, which also confirms that these were likely original with the building in terms of what John Calvin Stevens put his mark on the architecture. So right now this appears to be a lobby. At one time it was configured a bit differently. There were actually 3 entrances into the theater. This was one, there was one probably around this area here, and then this one still exists. And it was actually a doorway coming from the outside where that showcase is right now. And later, there were offices. That annex did not exist. That behind that wall are now offices and like a tower. That didn't exist. It was this, like the fire escape and a way to get into the theater. And there were 2 offices here. And then during the movie theater, there was a box office, I believe that was right here. And so there was a grant for about $20,000 or $25,000 that started the process of the tower in the back that allowed office space and storage space there. So that was kind of a big deal at the time. But it's hard to imagine crowds coming in with this. What did they do with everybody during intermission, right? Look how tiny this is. So that's a bit of a mystery to us as to how did they get people in and out. I think everyone just came in and then they left. So I don't think there was a lot of congregating that happened. So now we're inside the theater, and the theater has, this section has changed a little bit. When we first started doing work here at the theater, I'm not sure there were any even toggle switches. These were all switches that we added later to modernize, but everything was done by circuit breakers. And the funny thing about this, and the reason why I bring it up, is that we do have people that talk about a ghost of City Theater, and they talk about Eva Gray. And I always thought that it's probably not Eva, it's probably Barty Murphy. So Barty was someone who started as an usher and then worked his way up as a manager when it was a movie theater. And I always feel when I used to work here, when I was hitting these circuit breakers, I would feel that Barty was hanging out right here, just making sure I was doing it right. And there are other sightings of Barty. People would say that they saw a man in the balcony or by the projection booth. So, you know, when you spend a lot of time somewhere, I think when you go to that other place, sometimes you don't go to that other place. You kind of hang around to the places that your energy was for a really long time. Eva, that story we'll talk about maybe later, but what I wanted to do is just bring up Barty because we know he was someone that really spent a lot of time at City Theater. He even had a monkey called King, so that was for King Kong, and people talked about how the monkey would collect tickets, and it was kind of a little bit of a marketing thing. And Barty liked to wear big plaid suits, and he had, I think, a Cadillac that was, so he liked the big and the flashy, so he was quite a character. But people like that, really, you can just imagine, you know, how many hours they spent in a place and all the different people that they interfaced with in the community. So as we walk along this way, these are now the bathrooms, but at one time these were configured a little bit differently. But there was always some type of a concession here, or a coat area was mostly what they did in the early days. And what we really wanted to do is find out about the lighting as much as possible, or any features that we could bring back. So this chandelier actually was a second generation. The first generation of lighting here had gas and electric, so it would have had some type of a cup at the top for the gas, and the bottom had a bulb of some sort for electric. These were put in probably that second phase, likely at the turn of the century. And we had these restored. They were falling apart. They were all full of dust and years of, I think people were allowed to smoke back back in the day, so all kinds of nicotine that was on the walls. It was pretty substantial in terms of how it changed what you see today as what it looked like before. So we relocated some pieces and we had replicas, and the things that we couldn't, we actually purchased pieces from the time period. So right now we're up in the balcony, and the balcony configuration is pretty much the same as it was. We did have to take out some seats for fire code, but the good news is there really isn't a bad seat in the house, but there are probably 2 bad seats, and one of them's way over in the corner, and the other one's behind the lally column downstairs. So that's for tips and tricks about seating. Those are the 2 areas I would not recommend. A lot of folks are very reminiscent of the balcony because when they came here when it was a movie theater, there was some making out up here or causing of trouble. Tom just pointed up to the top of the balcony, which was maybe he had a girlfriend up there that he wants to talk about later or not, but that's usually where people just want to come and sit in the balcony, and I don't blame them. This is a horseshoe balcony is what we refer to this as in the English style. There were more seats before because there was no projection booth, which would be behind us, and we'll go up there in just a moment. But from here, you see the beautiful stage, and I don't know if it's able to be seen on the video, but there will be some pictures depicting all the stencil work that was done around what we call the frame as the proscenium of the theater. And it looks like carved wood, but it's actually painted stencils, as well as what is on our ceiling. And when I started to come and work here at the theater had a ceiling. This color was not the color, it was olive drab green, and there were multiple holes because we have a large attic above that people would walk on and put their feet through the ceiling. They wouldn't fall through, but someone's leg actually came through once, and they had a big piece of plywood covering it up. And so, also of interest is that the vaulted section of the ceiling has cherubs painted up there, and there was a large chandelier that hung there at one time. We do not know where that went. I looked, I exhausted all options on that one, but now it's the supply for our air conditioning, so it does serve a purpose. The colors you see in here are the original, and we thought through a lot of the stories that were told before, as well as newspaper articles that described it in tones of ivory. We had always assumed that it was more like white or cream tones, but there's this beautiful salmon with a butterscotch, light butterscotch trim that's quite lovely. And when you see it all together, you can see how they use the term ivory. Unfortunately, the theater had multiple paint jobs, and there was a time when they had wallpaper on parts of it. There was a time where they painted things to look like marble. There was another time when it was a movie theater. They made it look almost like Fantasia. They had these large botanical paintings of flowers that they had put on the walls. And there was also a cinema screen that they did CinemaScope, which was in an advertisement where the movie screen went beyond the proscenium. And I think The Robe was I'm pretty sure was the movie that they first had shown on it because it was done in CinemaScope. So that was one of the highlights of the movie years. So there's all kinds of treasures that we can find, and sometimes we're not always paying attention when we're putting in additions, and sometimes things are done consciously or not. In this case, I'm not really sure. I think they just decided we need a projection booth to show movies, so they decided to carve out this little spot at the top of the balcony. But what they did do is just leave this section alone. This is original. And all you can see, the beautiful dental work, the egg and dart, And all of this is molded plaster. So this isn't carved out of wood, this is actually plaster. And this has got a couple of coats of paint on it, but again, the original did not look like that, but these are the original features. So this was likely probably painted over, and you can see this is all plaster that literally had the paint failed right off. So as we step in here, this is the projection booth. So on the floor is concrete, and they needed to pour concrete because it would keep the projector from moving, and so that was it would stabilize the projector. So I can just imagine what it must have been like to put this form in and bring in concrete. Probably had to come in wheelbarrows, and they poured this slab to make a projection room. And this door is covered in metal, and this officially makes it fireproof. So this was a old school fireproof door. So today we use this as our lighting booth, and we have modern equipment that we use to control the lights. When I first started working here at City Theater back in I would say the late 70s, early 80s, the theater had, their dimmer was probably this big, and they had 6 controls. And later they got these huge packs they used to be back on our fly rail, which we'll see in a little bit, but those now are condensed down to these smaller units. So one of these used to be this big, and now we have this. And we have most everything's done by computer, which is great. The projection booth had not this much area to see. It was basically a little box just big enough to have the projection lens be able to throw the picture on the screen. And I also want to point out from the view of the audience, when you look up, we have these beautiful coffered ceilings, and these were the ceilings that had multiple holes. People were allowed to smoke at one time, being gas electric. I'm sure the emissions from the gasoliers had created an olive green patina, and you could barely see the stencils. So Tony Castro and his crew, we actually had scaffolding that filled the theater, and you were able to climb up the scaffolding and touch the ceiling, and they worked for a whole summer to look at what the original colors were. And way over on the corner, we were able to keep something original, and it's one of the pieces that runs across with a darker color to it. What they did is they washed the paint off the ceiling, wrung out the cloths in a bucket, and the pigment settled to the bottom. They added a binder to it and repainted that section so it would be original. Everything else was replicated, and it's quite remarkable. And what's also of interest is the gilding on that middle section, that vaulted section. And again, you can see the little chairs, but if you get really close to them, they're not so friendly looking. And one looks like Abe Lincoln, one looks like Tony Curtis, and their wings almost look like bat wings. They're actually very pointy. But from here, they look very charming and cute. So now we're looking at the top of the proscenium, and you see this face. And there's been a lot of speculation as to what does it represent. And when we're looking at the cherubs, the seashells, the different muses that are here, drama. So that's really what the interpretation is it's possibly like a god or a muse of drama, is what we were told. I can't verify that, not really sure, and it's hard to tell if it's a man or a woman, even when we were up close to it, so it still remains a mystery. There are two, we call them cherubs on each side. One is for music, the other for drama. And what's interesting about them is we used to have an opera company that used to perform here in the summers, and they would play off of the cherubs on the side. And one of the things that they would do is one guy had a sword, and he would kind of poke the little cherubs, or he would make fun of the drama and replicate the pose of that you see there. And so they would bring them into their performance. But the mystery remains. And what was always fascinating is when we had school children that would come and watch plays with us, they were always asking about that. And so that's likely why we still hear it. And someone said, oh, I saw the eyes turn red. I saw blood dripping from it. So this beautiful piece, I don't really know if it's like a theater god or what, but it is definitely a continued source of conversation. So now we have the perspective of the actor on the stage and looking out into the audience. And when actors are on the stage, the bright lights pretty much blind you where you can't see. So this is actually kind of what it would look like. You can't really see faces very much, you just see reflections. But what's really nice about this stage is it has the addition of an apron. The stage used to end right here, and that was the end of the stage, and we had added this apron, and that was added for a show called Me and My Shadow, which was an original show that was an off Broadway production that was trialed here at City Theater, and they left the apron after, and we've kept it ever since, and it's really helped to increase the space. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go backstage, and we're going to hear the story of Eva Gray.
So Eva Gray was part of the traveling vaudeville group that came to perform. She was singing Goodbye Little Girl Goodbye on stage, and her daughter was in the front row, and she was on her third encore, and she started to have heart complications, and it's said that she came backstage into the dressing room and passed away at 42 years old, and now she is our City Theater ghost. And one of our traditions that we have here is we always say hello Eva when we come into the theater, because she just wants to be known. But we've had a couple of encounters with her, but she's, part of our theater, and we love to, keep her involved as well.
Those that have been done here at the theater, and this is the stage manager's desk. There are many more shows that came previously, but this tells you how busy the theater has been over the decades. Every theater, we're always concerned about fire, especially back in the day, and this has pretty much been untouched for many generations. To be honest, I think they do check some of these things, but I don't know if this has been discontinued or not, but all I know, it's been here since my guess, for many generations. It may even, parts of it are probably original, and we found that out even with the sprinklers. We had to have a new sprinkler system put in back in the 70s when it became used once more, but we found out later that above the stage there were original sprinklers, and how we found that out is it was a leak, and we traced it back, and the sprinkler company came, and they're like, okay, we'll take this back, we'll get you a replacement part. And they came back and said, these haven't been made since 1899. So we actually had some modern fire suppression equipment here back in that day.
As an actor or actress here, this is a wonderful staircase because we're going up to the upper level dressing rooms, and this is where the magic and the excitement is. Welcome to the fly rail. Fly rail is here. We have a catwalk that goes across the stage that way to get to the other side. But up here is where we have the sandbag, pulley, hemp rope, grid fly system. I'm sure the Smithsonian would love to talk to us about it because as far as we can tell, a lot of this is original. We do replace the hemp, the rope, every once in a while, counterbalanced with sandbags. But it's a full fly theater, so what you see on stage, if we drop from the fly, we can pull up out of sight for all our productions. It takes usually 2 or 3 people on a line to pull, depending on how much weight is on the bar. We're very cautious about the weight. But this is really, when you tell people it's a sailing ship, it really is. And you've got the pin and the rail, and basically you are hoisting sails. We're getting a view right now from the top of the stairs going into the costume attic, which runs entirely across the ceiling in the theater seating area. What you're looking down now at is the pipe system, which is part of the fly system, and the hemp, the ropes that go up to the pulleys above us. We call that the grid. And we're about 2 stories at least, 2.5 above stage floor, and it's a great view. Becky Witham is was one of our long-standing actresses here, very involved with the theater. And at her passing, she left for us some funds to do Becky's Closet, the attic costume shop of City Theater.
So these are the hats used for costuming for musicals and plays that we put on here at City Theater. Most of these are either donated or actually handmade by costumers. So yes, these are more costumes. Again, these are all donated, and a lot of elderly people will donate their clothes to us, and sometimes we just get costumes from movie sets. Actually, the most recent was American Horror Story season 11, which was set in New York City in 1980, but we got some of their costumes, and that season actually featured Patti LuPone, one of our fellow actresses that we love on Broadway.
Sure, for many years we've talked about removing it, but it's going to be here forever. There's no reason and no way to really move it.
So can you tell us what that is again?
It's an old air handling unit, and whether it was just for the projection area, not sure. Could have been for the whole building. I don't think we have a particular understanding about its entire use, but it is old and it's not going to leave this building. In the costume attic, we've got obviously costumes and a lot of relics up here, but one of the things we love to show off, and it has been part of the Biddeford's Hidden Spaces, Secret Places, is this unit right here. So we're above the ceiling in the orchestra section, and so on the other side of this would be the cherubs we talked about before, and inside here would be the bars where the chandelier hung from. Now we've got our air conditioning and augmented heating, but it's a great view down because you can see the orchestra area through the grid.
When people perform in shows here, they will sign their name and their character that they played with the year. A lot of history on these walls of people who have come in and have done shows here. This is our green room. This is where our actors will come and do their hair and makeup before the show. Used with a lot of mirrors and lighting. It is perfect for putting on makeup.
So I also want to add a little bit of history to this space. There was actually, this was 2 rooms at one time, and we had a lovely woman, her name was Dolly LaJoy, and she was one of the people that used to bring tons of makeup. I think she, it wasn't really Avon, but it was something like that, and she would help with the makeup for a lot of the actors. She was very involved. And she took it upon herself to bring in some contractors and create a proper place for bathrooms for the actors and a place to put makeup on. So she has since passed away, but I really wanted I want to honor her for her efforts.
This is our annex. We typically use our annex space for dance rehearsals and music rehearsals when we are overlapping our main stage shows, and right now we have Sweet Charity going on, so they've been rehearsing down here for that. We also use it to store some extra set pieces as well, and it used to be a storefront originally, so we love the space.
Hi, Tom Gerard again. Today is Thursday, July 27th, and we have gathered again to conclude the City Theater tour with a brief discussion with Alyssa, Mark, and Renee. So I'm going to start with you, Renee. What have we not talked about concerning the history during your tour that you think we should be aware of?
I think pretty much the tour covered all the different aspects of a little bit of the history as well as the restoration work that had gone on. And I think what I'd like to share again is just how many people have come through this building and have had a place in the organization. And I think what is important to note is there are lots of pieces that we don't know, but I think they come to our attention in different ways. And hopefully what we discussed in the tour piqued people's interest, and you'll see some additional photos about the restoration as well as hopefully a little slide presentation about the history of City Theater and City Hall and some addendums, which I think you would find very interesting. I would say that we haven't talked about what's happening that's new in City Theater, and I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but I would like to just for a moment let folks know that during the time period when the theater wasn't used, there were always people interested in the theater and wanting it to come back to its original glory. And there were people that brought in different kinds, everybody had an idea of what they wanted to do, and they did everything from dance recitals were brought here very, very early. Gladys Rubin's School of the Dance was one of them. And also we had people, the BBs brought in a lot of, they started to bring in plays and bringing the whole musical theater piece back. But finally, City Theater Associates came into play, where that's when the current group that's overseeing the theater began. And they really did a lot of large productions back then, and they whole families were involved, which we talked about, I think, during the tour. The quality of those shows, in some respect, were really quite amazing for the time. And other times the quality was maybe not as good, but so many people participated that it was enjoyable, and people really felt that it was their theater. And I think that it's a testimony to people who utilize the arts as not only entertainment to watch, but participate in, whether it's backstage or on the stage. And I think the only thing I would say I miss today is that family, like a whole family could be included back then. And even if families wanted to do it now, people are so busy with so many different things, I don't think it would work. But that was such a lovely and fun time to be involved, because it was quite different. Also, it was easier to get volunteers back then. Today, it's very difficult to get volunteers. But I would say that the theater is definitely appreciated by many age groups today, and it's one of the things that I think has continued, is that they've always been, even looking at old pictures, you would see people utilizing the theater with different age groups, different events, different, I would say, purposes. And you know, it was sad to say at one time it was reduced to a storage facility, and we've come out of that. We've come out of the ashes of all of that.
Oh, thank you. And historically, what do you feel the impact of City Theater beyond entertainment has been on the downtown area?
Huge. Back in the 70s, there was a Look Up Biddeford campaign, and City Theater was just starting to basically be looked at as a place to revitalize again, and it was really the cornerstone of revitalization. There were other business folks downtown that had the concept of let's really make Biddeford great again in terms of its shopping and everything else, but those initiatives unfortunately started to fall apart because of economic challenges, but City Theater stayed on. And it was very interesting that for a while it was looked to as an albatross almost, of like one more problem that we have to spend money on. But soon, when little things happened where it gained some traction, those naysayers were the first ones to bring people in off the street and say, hey, look at this beautiful diamond in the rough. And so it was what kind of stabilized the whole concept that we could revitalize our downtown. And it became a part of being somewhat protected as being on the registry as a historical landmark, as the whole building is. But I really think that City Theater in many times was really what stabilized and galvanized the opportunity for the community to say we can revitalize our downtown. And I think you guys would probably agree with that too. And even today with the stuff you do with Heart of Biddeford and everything else.
Well, the turn of the century was
Right.
difficult, with the mills, waning and being
Yeah.
sold and being cut back. In 2005 to 2009, we were the only lights on after 7 o'clock downtown.
Yeah.
And I know that because my students at University of New England would say, it's really sketchy. I don't know if I want to go down there. So we kept this going. We were inventive in the artists and the shows that we brought in. But we knew that we were kind of fighting an upstream battle, but determined to maintain it. And we did, to get to the point where Biddeford, downtown Biddeford and Biddeford South caught up
Yep.
to what you folks did in the 80s and 90s and what we were doing at the turn of the century.
So Renee, City Theater's been with us through several generations, correct?
Yes.
And having your historical knowledge and everything, do you think the impact has been different for different generations?
Yeah.
And if so, how?
I think so. I think that maybe the level of respect of the theater and what it stands for may have changed. I think initially the theater was close to similarly what we're doing today, in that it was regarded as a form of entertainment. We were a part of the vaudeville circuit, so people would come by train, put on the shows, and the community looked to us as a form of entertainment. I think when it evolved into a motion picture scenario, I think initially there was a respect to the fact that they had CinemaScope, that it was kind of, this is really a great way to continue utilizing the theater, but they weren't so interested in plays anymore, and that really is a bit sad. They did have vaudeville acts that they utilized, but in the beginning, they were more theatrical. There were actually plays with little acts in between in the break, or songs, but that all went away with motion pictures. And that's also when the theater as we know it today in terms of its looks also went away. They kind of covered it up. So in my mind, it was kind of the respect of the theater kind of shifted. And then it became, there were competition with other movie theaters. There were several in the area, and really City Theater wasn't regarded as a high-end movie theater. It was regarded as a place you could come in and put your feet on the seats, throw popcorn, and make out in the balcony. So, and then further disrespect came along when the movie piece also disintegrated, and also the different management groups that were involved. And then it became, as we said, a storage facility where really it was left to pile up stuff that they didn't know what to deal with, file cabinets, chairs, all of that, and then playing horseshoes in the orchestra pit or on stage. We're not sure exactly what location, but it was in that area. So I think then seeing it come back and be revitalized and it took a long time, several decades to get to where it is, but that just, I think, shows that somehow, even if people didn't have the respect, so to speak, that we would hope for, that they cared enough about this theater, that it was part of their community, that it was worth spending the time and money to revitalize it.
Thanks, Renee. Mark and Alyssa, do you have any questions historically for Renee while we have her with us today?
Every time I sit with Renee, there's something new you find out, but I think we're good. I'm
Okay.
good at this point.
So let's move on to today and going forward. What do each of you think in terms of the vision for City Theater today and moving into the future?
I guess I'll go first. City Theater, it has a huge place in my heart, but I love that, you know, it's a historical landmark, but not only that, but it's a little slice of Broadway. I think when people come in, they're amazed by all the structural in the audience itself, and then the stage and everything beyond that. It's a place to come be with your family. It's a place to just get away for a couple of hours. You know, there's a lot going on in the world, and the thing that I want to do most in my job is to take people away for a couple of hours, you know, put a smile on their face and have them come back. And it's, I think the best part about this place in general is just the community part of community theater. We have been working very closely within the community, Heart of Biddeford, all of the new businesses coming around, and I think that it's super important to continue that so we can, you know, stay up as a community and keep this place alive, because without the community we wouldn't be here. And you know, the history of this place is in the walls still, and I can feel it every time I come in. So my hope is to continue that, the history part of this entire venue.
I think one of the things that was mentioned was the idea that over time we tried different things. That when Renee said the movie theater here wasn't really a movie theater. Well, we've done movies here, we've done rock and roll, we've done the string quartets, but we've kind of settled over these years since the renovation with being a Broadway theater. We've done our shows, we do 5 main stage musicals or plays a year, and what we've done is we've taken the room, the stage, the sound, the lights, and made them the best we could be for those productions. Now we still do a little rock and roll, we do some comedy and some other things, but what we do really well, we want to do really well, and those are our main stage shows. And that's kind of what we've learned over the years. As I said, we're still doing a movie here and there, but that's not our forte at this point in time. And then we've been rewarded for that. We've had some ups and downs over the years in terms of the associates and the programs that have put on and attendance, but right now we're in probably as best as we've ever been, or gone back to where we first started. in the 80s. So we're very proud of where we are and that this is going to be maintained.
And my growing up in the area, I've always thought of community theater being the summer theaters in Maine. And do you see that as competition, or do you all feed off of one another, or?
I think it's a combination of the two.
Yeah.
We do help each other as far as publicity goes. With Maine State, for example, we'll do a trade and, hey, will you put us in your program? Great, we'll put you in our program. And, we'll do a shout out for you and stuff like that. But at the same time, I am finding that there is a little bit of competition in the theater world. It's with us and surrounding theaters for sure.
Adding air conditioning really helped the summer
It
quality
does,
of
it
our
does.
theater.
Yeah.
We were on our third AC system.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we did that in 2005, 6,
I think
we
it
got
was, probably about in that time period.
Yeah, that allowed us to do summer shows that we could be very comfortable doing. Now backstage, when we recently added some air conditioning back there, so the actors were sweating a lot, but everybody else was comfortable. But yes, that allowed us to do the summer theater, and we do really well. The other thing about a summer theater now is at least 25% of the people who are coming to summer shows here are not from the state, and we know that from ticket sales. And that's a difference that I've seen since being here since 2005 forward. Is a lot of people are discovering us who are also discovering Maine.
And I would think that competition breeds higher quality as you all go on, or at least makes it a goal for you to put on the highest quality productions you can.
Well, Broadway World, I think about 6 years ago, named us as one of the top 5 theaters in Maine, and the other 4 are professional.
Wow.
That's Maine State Theater. We have a high quality of performance here. We're attracting more and more folks to audition, which kind of poses some problems to folks who really want to perform, although we do some other things that people can be involved with. But yeah, our notoriety has definitely grown in the state.
So now I have a question for the three of you. Was there ever an educational component for community involvement?
Yes, actually, I think it was probably the early 2000s. We had director Janet Ross, who worked with, at the time, I believe, was our president, was Gail Roller, who was also in charge of the Gifted and Talented program with the, it wasn't just Biddeford, but it was surrounding schools. And so what they did is they had identified students that would come here and receive theatrical education and workshops by a very seasoned director who was also at one time a school teacher. So that was very successful, and it brought another level of opportunity for young people interested in theater. We also did summer camps, which I think we may have mentioned in the tour, where we had kids from the community be able to sign up and participate in a summer camp program. And we also had opportunities where when we were doing a show, we did an abridged version and would have school children bussed here to watch the performance.
I think the last one was 1776, if I'm
Probably
correct. And it was
correct,
monies that the school system had to bring students in. When we cast the show, we would let folks know, can you do this, Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. show? But it was really good, and it was great to get younger folks into this theater. Yeah, along the lines too, I worked at University of New England for a number of years, and about 2005, the university was looking to expand and become more of a multi-university, and started to accept students who had done theater and done music and done arts. Knowing that, we had them down here for shows. They found us anyway. There were students here all the time that had been on stage or helping out. But there was a concerted effort on the school's part in the theater to join really well. So there were students on the board of directors, there was staff on the board of the directors, there were students who were house managers, and also doing sets. The university players were down here at a time. There were classes actually done here, art classes, English classes. Opera was brought in, we brought in Shakespeare, and it was quite a vibrant time. When the university changed directions and became the health science school that it is today, we lost a lot of those students and lost that contact, unfortunately. We still see students here, but we haven't had many perform here recently. So that was a little bit of a loss.
And currently, right now, City Theater is teaming up with MacArthur Library to work with children from the ages 7 to 12 to do a soft introduction of what theater is, from all different aspects, from lighting to acting to sound to even mask making, you know, just different things to introduce to them and plant the seed. We do that once a week as a summer camp, and we're hoping to continue it throughout the rest of the year, and the kids just love it. And honestly, when I think of how to continue theater is by, you know, introducing it to them at a very young age. So I'm hoping that this will be our future community in years to come.
Also, for the third time this summer, we'll be working with the Biddeford Historical Society for doing a production of Liberty Defended at the Meeting House. Liberty Defended is a historically accurate depiction of 1774 Biddeford. The play was written in 1774. It's a dramatic reading, but in casting it, we've got families who are actually going to be part of the production. So we still look at what we can do. Next year's show, coming out of the pandemic, shows are going to be more family friendly for cast. We wanted to keep our cast a little bit low coming out of the pandemic, but we're going to be doing a couple of large shows, Elf being one, Oklahoma being another, which appeal to families being on stage. We've done a number of those recently. The Christmas Carol, the musical, we did twice. Wizard of Oz we did with a cast of 75 people,
Yeah.
but there were families involved in that too, on stage and of course in the audience.
Well, history's going to repeat itself because that's how
Absolutely.
it started
That's right.
before with South Pacific, Oklahoma. So,
Mhm.
well, there we go.
We've learned well.
So Mark and Alyssa, what is the greatest current need for City Theater?
Volunteers. We need help. And you know, again, that's why being a part of the community is so important right now, and that's how we get a lot of our volunteers. But to keep this place going as a nonprofit business, we do need the volunteer help.
I'd go facility. We had a plan just before the pandemic hit to do a capital campaign for a three-phased renovation, renaissance, and new building. We are in desperate need of storage and set building areas. The idea was to put a building out in back, attach it to the back of the stage where we could both store our items, build our items, also have modern day dressing rooms. The next part of that was to redo the fly system. We have a fly system, if you understand those, where we may have a piece of set, and then with rope and pulleys and sandbags, we'll pull that out of sight of the audience. Well, that's an 1896 system that the Smithsonian probably would love to have. And while it is safe and what we use it for, we would like to do more things, which means a more modern day fly system. The other part of it was to improve somehow the lobby, bathrooms, and the creature comforts of coming to a show. And that whole capital campaign was suspended when the pandemic hit.
So speaking of the pandemic, we haven't mentioned COVID at all. Can you talk about your experiences with COVID and the impact it had on City Theater?
One of the saddest days we ever had here was on March 13th, 2020. We got the official notice that the state was, and the country was basically shutting down. That was opening night for a long-awaited production of Little Women. Cast was outstanding. We had spent about $6,000 on proper costuming. We had to go in and tell the cast that we weren't going to be able to do the show at all. But when we did that night, we let them run through it for those of us who were here, and we got through it, and then we shut down. It was a lot of work for the folks here who volunteer, who work here. We remained viable. We remained paying our 2 employees at that point in time. We immediately started looking at doing things on video, which we did. We did 4, I believe, videos. We took the time, because we were coming up on our 125th anniversary of doing a documentary, and we did that professionally done, and it's an excellent one. It's on our website. So we did that. We burned through we were lucky enough that we had an emergency fund that we did burn through, but we're also very fortunate with the assistance of the state of Maine, the U.S. federal government, the city, the Maine Community Fund. We got 2 anonymous large donations from them to remain viable, pay our folks and continue. We had folks who were sending money unsolicited. We had really good subscription to the videos that we did, and then we stayed and waited for the pandemic to finally ebb.
And we have the best quality air in Biddeford, Maine, I'd say, because we installed a new filter, air filter, so we have the best quality air. So if you want some good air, come here.
Yeah, our main system we upgraded. One of our sponsors and one of our angels is Jim Godbout Plumbing, and he came in right away and started working with us on what do we need to be safe in here. But we did not stop creating art. We did not stop communicating with each other. We did not stop planning and waiting. We did take a financial hit, but we remained viable. And like I said, because of the good years and the fiduciary responsibility we had with managing that money, we were able to take our rainy day fund and get through along with some help.
I'll also add to that, having that time away from the theater community made us realize how special it is, and how special it is to have that time together, coming together to put on art, to put up magic on the stage. And having that piece missing from your life, you don't realize how much it means to you until you lose it. So the fact that we're back and thriving more than ever, I think we're all coming into it in a different place, coming from our hearts, and just spending quality time together. I mean, I think we all went through that when we were in COVID. It's, we couldn't leave our houses. It was terrible, but I think the best part about coming back to it is just having a hug again. A simple hug.
I think that also powered us to be coming back earlier than most theaters and better than most theaters. We wanted to get back. We had a plan. We kept the cast small. We kept people safe in terms of masking and distancing. And we did all those things for us and for our patrons, and we were respected for that. And then in doing our shows, we didn't lose a show to COVID on staff or on stage, which was outstanding.
Yeah.
And as I said, we came back where others are still trying to come back and working hard to do so. We made it back quicker.
So Renee, historically speaking again, for the people viewing this, or that will view this, what is the one takeaway you would like them to have?
I just would like people to always consider City Theater their theater. It belongs to the community, and even though we talk about Broadway level or whatever, it's still, what's magical about it is that it's a community theater. It is not, and it's also a museum in a sense, because we've been able to keep the history intact as well, and that's what makes this theater so special. And a big takeaway for myself personally would be my dad, who was the person that said to me, "Hey, Nay, guess what? There's a theater downtown that we're trying to get it to come back, and can you come over with your brother and with a broom and a dustpan and help us out?" And that was the beginning of me stepping into the theater before I even did a play here. And my dad, who has no theater background or anything, just came to it because it was part of his community, and he saw the diamond in the rough. And so that's the takeaway.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. And Mark and Alyssa, same question for you, but focusing on current and future, what is the one takeaway you would like folks to have when they view this?
That was good.
I don't think I can top that. She basically took the words out. No, I have to also just piggyback off of the community portion of it. Just knowing that this is a place people can come to. And again, this is all of our theater. It's not one person's theater. You can feel the history in the walls. This place has the same bones as it did over 100 years ago. You know, you can just feel the warmth that this place gives, and the hospitality, and just everything that it gives. I feel all of us as a community can give back. So.
If you want to be proud about something that you do, come and do something here. We have all been on stage, we have all ushered, we have all done the financials, we've all done painted sets, we've all done the facility thing. So it is, as has been said, it is the community theater, but whatever your talent is, we could use it, and this can be yours. And please, when you come in, take pride in what we have.
And I think the stewardship is the other piece to this, continually passing it along and hopefully bringing it better than it was, you know, like anything else. But I think about the people who have made the decision back at the turn of the other century, right? Trying to figure out whether or not it was worth the money to rebuild this. And they said it was. So it's our responsibility to continue that legacy.
Right. And then that was restated again in the 70s and 80s, and then restated again around 09 and 2010. It hasn't been it's been a steady trip, but there's been bumps along the way.
Yeah.
But the stewardship is very, very important, and especially the financial stewardship. The associates run this facility. We get a little modest money from the city each year for some facility work. But it's the operational budget that operates this theater, keeps the lights on and keeps the renovations going and the shows here. And that has to be, you know, from a board that considers itself to be proud of what they're doing, but also watching carefully what we're doing and keeping this place moving forward, and we have.
Well, on behalf of the Biddeford Cultural and Heritage Center, Nicole and I can't thank the three of you for, you know, this educational, informative tour and discussion. We really appreciate your time and participation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your efforts.
You're welcome.